Hi, and welcome to this new format I'm trying out. So leave a comment if you like it, and if you don't, well, thumbs down. Got my new t-shirt on, and in this episode I'm going to look into QGIS styling of vector layers, which is a huge subject. So I will definitely need to limit myself in this episode. I will only talk about point layers, and I will skip data-defined overrides. I will probably mention it something in the end, and I will just touch on the subject geometry generator. Live effects I will touch on as well, but it will be a long video anyway. So welcome to this new format, and please enjoy. So, styling in QGIS. First of all, you can manage all your styles in the settings of QGIS. You have a style manager, and you can access this style manager from other parts of the system as well. So we'll get back to this, but here you can organize your symbols for lines, surfaces, color ramps, and so on. And you can organize them in groups, whatever you like. You can also do quick style changes by the context menu, the right-click menu on the layer. You have style options. Here you can copy and paste a style from layer to layer. You can manage several styles for each layer and select one of them. And you can also do quick changes live by changing the color wheel. You can also pick the recent colors or edit the symbol. Every layer has layer properties, and you can access those properties in many ways. I think you can do it from here. Yeah, properties from the menu. You can also use the context menu, right-click and select properties, and you can double-click on the layer. I'm not surprised if there's a keyboard shortcut as well. The more recent QGIS versions also have a new option, and that's the layer style panel, and that's this little button up here. It opens a panel that makes everything live, all the changes live. Let's make this a bit bigger. So I will be using this panel, but the layer properties panel is the same, essentially. But by using this live updating, I can modify and work with the map at the same time. The properties dialog locks the map, so I can't do anything. But this is a panel, and it doesn't lock the map. So anything I do to change it here will change live in the map. And I think that's kind of nice. I also won't be using my background map very much, so I'll just turn that off. First of all, I don't know if there is the correct names for it, but I try to explain to myself how styling works. So for instance, you can have no styling. no symbols. And that may be useful if you, for instance, will use labels. And don't want to have a symbol in the way. So that is one option, no symbol at all. Otherwise, you have a few style classes. I call them that at least. And they all have basic properties with overrides. And some style classes also have markers. And they can have one or, in some cases, many markers in each class. And the markers, in turn, they can have one or many style layers with their individual properties. So I'll try to separate these terms. But let's start with one of the style classes. That's a single symbol, and it has markers. But let's start with the overall properties for the single symbol. So when I select the single symbol, it shows me a page with properties that I can change. And this is the style class properties. Here I can change the color, and it depends on where I click. So if I click on the color bar, I will get a few options to change the color in several different ways. You can even pick a sample color from anywhere in my interface. So let's go for the old logo yellow, like that. I have sliders for a lot of changes I can do. I can also change the color opacity, that is essentially transparency for the color. When I change the size for my symbol, it doesn't have any unit, and I can't write meters or something like that here. It doesn't work. So it doesn't have any unit. The unit I set up here, and as a default it's millimeters, which works on the screen as well as in print. You can also select pixels, but that is mostly for on-screen work. So if you do a lot of web maps, this may be a good option for you. But then you need to consider high resolution screens and low resolution screens. If you print using pixels as a measurement, it will be translated to dots per inch on the printer. And that is completely different from the pixel resolution on the screen, so beware. I quite like the map unit, but 14 meters on a national level doesn't show up. So let's go for 5,000. And this is dependent on the coordinate system of your layers. So my layers are in a projected coordinate system that has coordinates in meters. So my measurements will be in meters if I use map unit. But let's go back to millimeters, and now it will be interesting to see how 5,000 millimeters look. Like that. 5 is better. Okay. Let's switch to a symbol that we can rotate. Rotation. 0 is straight up to north. And as I increase the rotation, the symbol will rotate. I can also type in a number, so 180 is straight down. And here we have pre-created symbols. These are the defaults, but I can also open the style manager and the symbol library and manage my symbols and create more if I want to. If I create a new symbol, let's make it green like that. And I want to save it for later. I can just press save, and I need to give it a name, ugly. And that will be in my library now. And if I want to, I can tag it and put it into a group and so on. And then my groups will be selectable in the style properties. Advanced I will get back to. Let's look at transparency. I already showed you how you can make colors transparent by changing the opacity or the alpha channel. You can also make the entire layer transparent by this slider down here. But as you see, you have another slider for transparency in the layer class. Let's call it layer class. That's the transparency for the marker. So the layer transparency treats all the markers as one object. And the difference will hopefully become apparent in a little bit. Let's make the triangle really bigger, like that. So if I make the layer transparent, it's what you expect. I turn on the background map. But if I make the markers transparent, let's see if you see the difference. The marker transparency takes into consideration any markers that are beneath it. So they will show through the above markers. So let's go back to layer transparency. And the marker transparency. Okay. Then we have something that I will skip more or less entirely. You can have blending modes. And this is really powerful if you want to put a bit more finesse or artistic feel on your maps. You can use it to create a texture effect on maps by blending layers together. And if you have worked with photo software or graphic software, you probably know the terms of blending modes. You can also draw effects. And I will just show you one effect, and that's a drop shadow. I don't want to have white drop shadow, I want to have it black. No, that's the outer glow. Get rid of that. Drop shadow, there it is. Like that. Outer glow is, let's make it radioactive. Anyway, the effects, they are created live. So they will take some resources from the computer to calculate. And each time you pan or zoom the map, it will need to be generated again. So the effects are live. So I tend not to use them unless they give me something that I really need. The rendering order, as you see here, points are drawn on top of each other. And if you have some objects that you want to be above, you can control the rendering order by some expressions. You can have a number of expressions, sorting them in a specific by attribute or anything. But I won't go into that either. Okay. Let's look at my styling. So we had no styling, and we have style classes with properties. As a default, you have the single symbol style class. And now we have looked at the single symbol style class properties. But a single symbol is a style class with markers. And it has one marker. And each marker contains one or several style layers. And if I click on the layer, the style layer here, the simple marker, you will see that the properties will change. So here's the style class, unit, transparency, color, size, rotation, the basics. But if I look at the underlying symbol layer, I will get a lot more options. So for instance, I can change the outline color, much the same way as before. I can change the outline width. I can change the when lines meet at a corner, you need to do something about it. So if I make my outline really big, you can see my triangles, they are cut. That's a bevel, and that's the default. You can also make it a miter, and that will not cut off the corners. Or you can make it round. But I will leave it at the default. You can also rotate. It's the same as in the general properties. But here you can offset it. So for instance, the point location is exactly in the middle of the hair cross. And if you want the symbol to be pointing to that location, you can offset it. Let's see if it's that one. Yep. Like that. But you can also change the anchor point by changing it from vertical center to top. And this depends on the symbol, what it looks like. Or bottom. You can also change the basic shape. So for the marker, you change the marker style, predefined marker styles. But this is a simple marker. And here you can change the shape, the basic simple shape for the simple marker. You have more layer styles than, what did I call it? Style layers than simple marker. There's also ellipse marker. That takes a basic shape, ellipse, a square, diamond, cross, or some form of triangle, semicircle, and you change the symbol width and height individually. And of course you can change the outline, rotation, offset, and so on. But this gives you a bit more flexibility with very simple shapes. Filled marker. That is also a very simple shape, but it gives you the possibility to have more advanced fill styles. For instance, for a background to a symbol. And fill is something that is normally only available for polygon styles. But here you can use more complex fill styles. I won't go into that too much. Just name that there are a symbol layer type that is called filled marker. Font marker. Let's make it black. Here you can use any font symbol in your installed font library, and you just select the font you want to use. Let's go with Trueno. That's the QGIS font. And any symbol you find here, you can use as a symbol. You can also set outline for your symbols. And for that to show, you need to have an outline. So like that, for instance. And other settings are the same as before. Okay, the geometry generator. This is a very complex styling generator. You have a lot of flexibility. You can create very complex objects that are dependent on the objects themselves. So I will just mention that this is very complex. It is an option, but stay away from it for now. You can go into it when you get bored with all the other styling options. Simple marker we already focused on. SVG marker is more or less like the font marker, but you don't pick a font or text. You pick already created SVG files. And there are a few in a library like this. And they have different properties. So for instance, this looks like black outline and a gray fill, but it's not. It's actually all fill, and the fill is a transparent fill. And how the SVGs react in QGIS really depends on how they are created. And you can create your own SVGs and use them, but they need a few specific attributes in the SVG files in order to be able to change the fill, the outline, and outline width, and so on. So for instance, if I add outline width to this, it will start to look weird. While other symbols work fine with outline. So they react differently depending on how they are created. And they are categorized in groups, make it easier to find. And then we have vector field marker. I will not talk that much about it. It's if you have data with an offset or a direction or something, you can use it an X and Y direction, offset in X and offset in Y. Or if you have a direction and distance fields, you can use that here. I'll just pick something. I don't see any angle lines. Oh, there's one. Anyway, this will create a line based on your attributes, and it can be useful, for instance, if you have weather data points with wind direction and wind speed. This can be used. That's one use case. To show where this is anchored, I will add a symbol layer, the green plus. And I will make the line a bit bigger. I will also scale it a bit more. So here you see I have two symbol layers. A red dot on top. Let's make it bigger. And a vector field marker underneath. If I want to change this so the dot is under, I'll just change the order like that. And I can have as many objects I want. So for instance, let's make a phone, black phone. Or a white phone. And I'll remove the vector field marker. Make the phone a bit bigger. Let's make the background a bit bigger. And have a bigger outline. And offset it. Like that. And then let's make the entire marker bigger. And that will scale all the symbol layers within the marker. Another thing, the green here affects the underlying symbol layers. So if I change that to red, you see the phone disappeared. That is because it isn't locked to a certain color. I can change the color to a light one, and then I can use the padlock for the font marker and lock that. Now when I change the color in the marker level, only the background will be changed. And if I want to create another font marker, I don't need to add a simple layer and then change it to font marker. I can duplicate it. And then just style it with something else. Okay. Let's rotate that. You should have fun when you work with QGIS. Okay, that was that. I think we looked into all the markers. Yeah. So the single symbol style class have one marker, and you can have many style layers in that marker. And each of those style layers have their own separate properties, but the style class properties overrides some of them unless you lock them. So let's look at some other style classes. This was a nice symbol. I think I'll save it. Save. Funny one. So here we have the others. The single symbol is the simplest. It goes directly to the marker. The other 2 or 3 have another level before you get to the marker. So categorized, it is what it says. It divides the layer into categories, and that means you need something to categorize on. So you need to select an attribute, and here I have a category attribute. Let's use that one. You can create a base style. Let's use my ugly one. And you can style this by color randomly, which is suitable for categories that are not more or less worth than the other points. Or you can use a color ramp. But let's use random colors. Just press classify, and all the values in the category field will be listed here. And if I open the legend, you see that they will also be listed here. And there are some that I don't understand. You may not understand a lot of them because they are in Swedish. But for instance, the value LN, I don't know what that is. So let's say it is dog park. That will immediately update the legend to dog park without changing the value. Here we have the same capabilities for each of the symbols that we did in the simple marker. So I don't need to change the base symbol. I can change the symbols individually. And I do that by, well, first of all, I can change the color, transparency, output unit size, and angle. I can copy and paste symbols from within this concept, but I can also double click, and then I can give each style a completely different symbol. I'm not sure why there is an outline on this, but that's okay. I can make it transparent. So the church is a plane. That's nice. If I want to change several symbols at the same time, I can select them and then right click and change their color to whatever. I don't think I can change the symbology for them like that, but then again I can use one symbol for one of them and then just copy that, select the rest and paste. but that didn't work. Well, that should work. I don't know why. Maybe I'm doing something wrong. In which case you will write something in the comments. Let's get on with the next style class. As you see, this one had several markers, and each of those had style layers. The next one has also markers, graduated. But in this case, you don't get to use all your attributes, only those that are possible to position on the graduated scale. I'm just going to use a code value. The same as before, you select a base symbol. Let's take the diamond. A little bit bigger. Since these are values placed on a scale, you can format this in any way you want. Like right now it's the low value to the high value. But if you want to, you can, for instance, add a % if the values are in %. You can change the precision as well. But let's go with this as for now. I remove my %. You can make the graduated scale by color or by size. And depending on what you choose, you have different options as you go on. So let's go with color scale, spectral, and classify it. You select how many classes you want. And depending on your mode choice, you will get intervals that are slightly different. And you can check your intervals in the histogram by loading the values. And you can here do manual changes as well. Apart from equal interval, that is, did I change it back? No, I didn't. Okay, now I did. Equal intervals, that takes from 0 to the maximum value and just divides the range into equal intervals, depending on how many classes you selected. Quantile. It divides the intervals so there are more or less the same number of objects in each interval. Natural breaks is something I use quite often. It's a statistical measurement, but it also considers the amount of data. And then you have the pure statistical option, standard deviation. And that is completely based on the standard deviation of the population. Pretty breaks, that's the journalist division. It looks pretty in the legend. Let's look at the legend here. And if you don't like the decimal point, well, go to 0 decimal points. If you want a %, add a %. Or dogs. Let's talk about color ramp a bit. We have talked a lot about colors, but the color ramp is extremely powerful to edit. So you can change the stops on the gradient, change the colors for them. You can add your own stops. You can change a lot of information about the ramp in a plot. So alpha, for instance, that is transparency. So you can make the blue value completely transparent if you want that. You can change the lightness or the hue. And make a completely custom color ramp. Let's change method to size. Since my numbers are upwards to 100, it's not really wise to use size from 0 to 100. So instead you can define a scale. So the smallest symbol should be 4 and the biggest one should be 18. And QGIS will scale it depending on what mode you choose. So let's use Jenks. Like that. Okay. Rule-based classes. All of the previous graduated and categorized are rule-based, but rule-based are more capable than they are. So here you have my, okay, it disappeared. Let's make it color, classify again. Switch to rule-based. It still looks the same, but the rules are created for me from the graduated style settings. So let's clear out that and create a rule of our own. Here you can create as many rules as you want. And each rule will have a label. Let's make it churches. And to filter that out, I need to create a filter that uses the field category that equals church. Like that. Now we see all the churches. Let's have a church symbol for that. SVG marker, religion. That could be a church. Bigger. And green looks fine. And now I can add as many rules I want, and I don't have to create every rule on the category. I can create a rule for anything in the layer. I can base it on a field. That's a direction value. Let's see what we have. Okay. Let's have a filter for everything that is over 180. like that. And let's name it over 180. And that should be a down arrow. Let's make a drop shadow on that one. Just because I can. So now I have two rules. One for symbols that are over 180 degrees in rotation, and one for church. If I want to see everything else in this layer, I can create a very simple rule by not adding anything. No filter. That brings in everything, including the previous ones. If I want to exclude all the previous ones, my filter will say else. So now I have a symbol for everything that doesn't have a rule. Well, I don't know what that did. Oh, there you go. Here we have a count values. Practical. Okay, that's rule-based. Point displacement. That is useful when you have a lot of points and need to organize them in some way. Right now it's using the rule-based renderer that I already created. So the point displacement will work with other symbols. But for now I will use a very simple renderer. I will use a single symbol. And I don't want to use the church. I will use a circle or my ugly. That's nice. So it will use a center symbol that I can change to anything I like, to a star or anything. And that center symbol represents all the symbols on the circle. So if I change the point distance tolerance, that is the distance that influences this, more points will come in under the influence of each other and center around a center point. I'll change that to a single instead. I think that's easier to see. So the longer influence distance, the more points will rally around a focus point. And when I zoom and pan, this will change because the influence will change. And if I choose to make it in map units instead, I need to increase this, but my zooming will not affect how the circles look. I can also select concentric rings. That will change how the point displacement will look. Now you have a few other options. Okay, Heatmap. That renders all the points into a raster layer, but it is still a point layer. But on the screen it will look like a continuous surface, a raster. And it takes its intensity from the number of points that are within a certain radius. So if I increase my radius, the influence around the points will increase. And since I'm using millimeters, when I zoom out, there will be more points that influence the layer. Let's make it a more interesting style, like that. Invert it. And I want to make the blue more transparent. Completely transparent, like that. And when I zoom in, this heat map will change, which is useful when I scale a map like this. I see some form of intensity at some levels, but when I zoom out, I change, and when I zoom in, it changes and gives me more detail. So I really can see the hotspots. And if I add a base map to this and add a layer transparency, the combined effect will give me a lot more information. That was all the classes. Let's see, what have we more? Yeah, symbol levels. Did I talk about that? No, didn't. Let's make a single symbol, use my funny. Symbol levels. That is a way to separate the drawing order. And I mentioned the control feature rendering order. That draws each marker in a specific order. But if I want to draw first my font marker, then my simple marker for all the markers, and then my font marker last, then I can use symbol levels. And I can't access that from this panel, I don't think. Yes, I can. In advanced, symbol levels. To enable symbol levels, and this will take effect immediately. No, it didn't. It will draw first layer 0, that is my font marker. Then layer 1, that is my symbol marker. Then layer 2, that's my font marker. I can change the numbers of these. So if I want I can even draw my font marker underneath before I draw my simple marker, but what's the use? But I can draw it at the same time. I'll change that later. Let's just make them draw all the style layers in at the same time. See how it looks. So first the font marker, then the simple marker, and then my phone. So if I want to draw the phone at the same time as my simple marker, I change it in the symbol levels to 1. Like that. And it did nothing. It should have. Maybe it doesn't work that way. Nope, doesn't work that way, obviously. Anyway, that is an option to change the drawing order using symbol levels. One more thing, saving your styles. When you save your project, the styles will be saved with the project. But you can also save the styles separately. And for that I need to go to the properties, layer properties, because it's not just the style that is saved, it's everything regarding the layer properties. So under the style button, I can save the style as a QGIS layer style file or the OGC compliant style SLD. That is not nearly close enough to what you can do with the QGIS layer styles. If you have data in a database, you can also save the style to the database, but it will be a QGIS layer style syntax. So if I save that as a layer style file, I can name it anything and save it anywhere I want. But one option is to save it as default. Save as default. Then it will save it in a way that the next time I add my layer, QGIS will find the style information and apply it automatically. So for if it is a file-based layer, it will be a QGIS layer style file named the same way as the file. The layer file. If it is a database, it will be stored inside the database. Probably not for all database formats, but for GeoPackage and PostGIS, it works that way at least. I can also add multiple styles to a layer. So let's rename my current style. Funny, because it is. And then I can add a new style. Boring. And change that to a circle. That's boring. Then I can switch between all my styles. Funny. Boring. Like that. Very useful. I want to switch back to my funny. So that hopefully I've tried to explain the structure between styling, and this is similar for lines and polygons as well. You can have no styling. You can select one of many style classes with some properties of them that are very basic for the style class. Some of the style classes have markers, one or many, and them in turn have style layers with their own properties. Overrides, if I just should mention something about that. When you look in the properties, you will find a lot of icons next to some fields, and these are the data defined overrides. So if you set the size here, it will be that size, but if you can override it by using information about the data. It can be a field. So for instance, let's use, that will be interesting, the code, and apply. Now the value of that field will be used. That didn't work for me, so I can also edit it and use the code, but divide it by 8. So it's still the value of that field that overrides the size, the yellow symbol. But more manageable. That is data defined overrides. And you have data defined overrides around a lot of the settings. So you can override almost everything, which is extremely powerful when you want to customize your layers. But I think that's it for this video. Leave a comment if you like this format. Longer videos, less scripted, and my Swinglish. I will still continue doing the quick tips now and then, but this gives me a way of dig deeper into a subject. So if you have suggestions of topics to dig deeper into with QGIS, just leave a comment, and I read the comments as much as I can. So I think that's it for now, and we'll see when there will be a new video next time. Bye for now.